My parents copied my signature for a $150,000 loan to pay for my sister's lavish wedding. And amazingly, I wasn't invited. I'm a 33-year-old man, and just last week, I received a baffling call from my bank. They were trying to confirm my identity regarding a $150,000 loan. Confused, I explained I hadn't applied for any loan. That's when I discovered the shocking truth. My parents had forged my signature to co-sign a massive loan just to pay for my sister's extravagant wedding. To make matters worse, I wasn't even on the guest list for the wedding they were funding. For context, my sister and I have never been close. She's always had the golden child treatment, and to be honest, she's never bothered to grow out of her entitled attitude. It's partly on my parents for enabling her behavior, but by now, she's in her late 20s, she's had more than enough time to mature, yet she hasn't. A few years ago, we stopped speaking entirely, and anytime we cross paths at family gathering, keep our distance. It's been clear for a long time that we don't get along, and the idea of us having a cordial relationship is just wishful thinking. With that history in mind, you can imagine how infuriating it was to learn that my parents not only took out a massive loan without telling me, but also forged my name to make me the co-signer, all while excluding me from the wedding I was apparently helping to fund. My sister has been with her fiance for about 2 years, and they got engaged earlier this year. I already suspected I wouldn't be invited to the wedding, so I didn't dwell on it much when they didn't send an invitation my way. My parents hadn't mentioned it either. But after that phone call from the bank, I immediately confronted, still clinging to the hope that this was all a mistake, some sort of mix-up. However, that hope was quickly crushed when they not only admitted to what they did, but justified it. Their defense, as my sister's brother, I apparently have a responsibility to support her wedding, whether I was invited or not. According to them, they were struggling financially and couldn't afford the lavish affair my sister had her heart set on. But instead of sitting her down to discuss a more reasonable budget, they decided to take out a loan. And since my credit score is in good standing, they thought it would be convenient to use me as the co-signer. Their reasoning for not asking me directly: they knew I wasn't on good terms with my sister, and they assumed that if they approached me with the idea, I would flat out refuse. So they figured it was easier to keep me in the dark and just forge my signature, hoping I wouldn't find out until it was too late. Without a second thought, my parents decided to move forward with their plan, completely disregarding the fact that I'd eventually discover the loan they took out in my name. They had forged my signature and gathered enough personal information to make it seem legitimate. To them, it was a foolproof scheme, except for one major oversight. They didn't expect the bank to take the extra step of calling me directly for verification before finalizing the loan. That's where they made their critical mistake. When I realized what they had done, I was beyond livid. I made it very clear that I wasn't just going to let it slide. I would make sure they were held accountable. But even in that moment, they tried to excuse their actions, saying they couldn't let my sister down because this was her one big request. But if I'm being honest, this wasn't the first time she's had extravagant requests, and my parents have always bent over backward to give her whatever she wants. This isn't really about the wedding itself. It's about their complete inability to say no to her. They've sacrificed their own dignity time and time again just to appease her every whim. The thing is, my sister and her fiance both have jobs. From what I've heard, they're financially stable enough to host a nice, respectable wedding on their own if they wanted to. It might not be the over-the-top spectacle my sister has envisioned, but it would be within their means, and they wouldn't have to rely on my parents, or worse, drag me into their mess. Frankly, I don't even blame my sister entirely for this. My parents could have easily declined her request, explained that they need to be mindful of their financial future, especially with retirement on the horizon. Her fiance's family did just that. They told them they weren't in a position to fund an extravagant event, and guess what? They're still on good terms. I have no idea why my parents feel the need to indulge every single one of my sister's demands, as if she'd throw a tantrum and cut them out of her life if they dared to say no. But here's the thing. It's their dynamic, and if they want to cater to her unreasonable expectations, that's their choice. It becomes a problem when they drag me into their drama without my consent, and that's where I drew the line. I told them I would be consulting a lawyer and plan to take legal action against them for falsifying my signature and using my information without permission. At first, they kept insisting that this was my obligation, that as family, I should support them no matter what. But when they realized I wasn't bluffing, the panic set in. My mother immediately resorted to her usual strategy, breaking down in tears, hoping that would soften me up. My father, however, tried a different approach. He attempted to appeal to my sense of family duty, saying it was my responsibility to stand by them, especially during such an important time in my sister's life. It was a ridiculous conversation. My father seemed more concerned about how this would affect my sister's image than the fact that he and my mother had actually committed a crime. He kept harping on about how the fallout would hurt her engagement as if that justified what they had done. His complete lack of remorse was infuriating, so after a few minutes of listening to the same excuses, I ended the call. Before hanging up, I made it clear that I was cutting them off entirely and they should be prepared for the legal consequences of their actions. After the call, I immediately reached out to the bank again, requesting a copy of the loan agreement. I needed to see the details myself before I moved forward with any legal action. At this point, my initial plan was simple. I was going to take legal action against my parents, but keep it private. I didn't want to stir up any unnecessary drama or air out my family's dirty laundry. After all, they are still my family, and no matter how angry I was, I didn't want to deal with the public embarrassment that could follow. But everything changed once I read through the terms of the loan. There was a particular clause that made my blood boil. All the borrowed money had to be repaid within 2 years. That's when I realized just how reckless and selfish my parents had been. I've been planning to start my own business for the past 6 months, a fact that my parents were well aware of. I've been preparing to leave my current job soon as I've been in talks with potential investors and have been getting everything ready to launch. Anyone who's ever started a business knows how risky it is, especially in the early stages. I need all the financial flexibility I can get, and there's no guarantee of immediate success. Yet, despite knowing all this, my parents still made me the co-signer on a massive loan without a second thought. Worse still, if they missed even one payment, I'd be the one on the hook to cover the shortfall. They didn't care how their actions could completely derail my plans. Not once did they think to discuss this with me beforehand or even ask for my permission. That's when something inside me just snapped. I felt an overwhelming sense of betrayal. After reading through the loan terms, I immediately called my lawyer and filled him in on the entire situation. Then, without wasting any more time, I logged into Facebook and began searching for my sister's fiance's profile. Here's where things might have gotten a bit out of hand. Despite everything, my sister hadn't blocked me on social media, so it was easy enough to find her profile. From there, it took just a few clicks to track down her fiance's account. Fueled by frustration and a sense of betrayal, I typed out a detailed message explaining everything my parents had done behind my back, suggesting he should really reconsider the engagement. I advised him to ask my sister if she was aware of what was going on, and if she wasn't, to break it off before it was too late. I didn't stop there. I copied the same message and sent it to his parents and a few other people tagged in family photos on his profile. If my parents wanted to hide their actions, I was going to make sure as many people as possible knew the truth. To be honest, part of me suspected my sister had at least some idea of what our parents were up to, which is why I reached out to her fiancé and his family in the first place. I wasn't convinced she was completely in the dark. Predictably, my actions set off a chain reaction. Things quickly spiraled out of control for my family. Not only was I suing my parents and working with the bank to expose the fraud they'd committed, but now their dirty laundry was public knowledge. It was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. I spoke to my parents once more a few days after contacting my sister's fiancé and sending those messages. They were in full panic mode. Apparently, my sister had confronted them about what they'd done after her fiancé filled her in. Turns out, she really didn't know that they had made me a co-signer without my consent. In fact, she had no clue that they even had to take out a loan to cover the wedding expenses. My sister was furious, and understandably so. She demanded they return all the money she had taken from them for advance payments to vendors. She wanted no part in this mess anymore, despite the fact that technically it was my parents' money. But at this point, she didn't care. She just wanted to distance herself from them. Of course, my parents were livid, calling her ungrateful for turning her back on them after they'd done all of this for her. Personally, I think my sister's anger was a lot more justified than theirs. Still, they were quick to shift the blame onto me. They accused me of stirring up trouble unnecessarily by reaching out to her fiancé, insisting that my actions had ruined their relationship with her. She wasn't speaking to them anymore. My sister wasn't shy about expressing her anger. She told me she had no clue that our parents had pulled such a stunt. If she'd known, she claimed she never would have taken a dime from them or even allowed them to pay for her wedding. According to her, my assumption that she had been in on it was completely unfounded. And because of that, I had stirred up unnecessary trouble for her. Now, her fiancé and his family were second-guessing everything, all thanks to the message I sent without talking to her first. She had a point, one I couldn't deny. I should have reached out to her before involving her fiancé and his family. I acted on the belief that she knew what was going on, and as a result, I had put her in an uncomfortable position. Everyone was now doubting her, and it wasn't just her fiance, it was his entire family. The frustrating part is that when something shady happens within a family, the fallout tends to stick to everyone involved, even those who didn't know or weren't involved. She reminded me that while we might not have the best relationship, she isn't someone known for dishonesty. I had to grudgingly admit she was right. As much as she's been spoiled and difficult, I wouldn't call her a liar. She's demanding and self-centered, yes, but she's never really had a reputation for deceit. For me to plant seeds of doubt about her integrity and to do it so convincingly that her fiance and his family, people who've known her for years, started questioning her character, well, that wasn't fair. I wasn't just some distant acquaintance. I was her brother. Coming from me, those doubts had weight. So now I'm stuck wondering if I did the right thing by reaching out to her fiance. Should I have just confronted her directly and avoided dragging her relationship into the mess? I didn't intend to ruin her engagement or her standing with his family. I genuinely believe she had known all along about what our parents had done, which is why I felt her fiance deserved to know what he was potentially marrying into. Maybe deep down, I was also acting out of spite, trying to get back at my family for the way they've treated me over the years. I can't pretend there wasn't some petty motivation behind it. But still, I didn't set out to wreck her life. I just wanted her fiance to be aware of the kind of people he was about to be tied to. After reflecting on it, I did decide to play it safe and try to smooth things over. I reached out to my sister and told her that I genuinely hadn't realized she was in the dark about what our parents had done. Honestly, given her history, I assumed she might have known and just turned a blind eye, but that wasn't the case. I apologized for causing trouble and offered to speak to her fiance again to make it clear that my anger had clouded my judgment. I assured her I haven't heard back from my sister yet, but at least I've done my part. I reached out offering an olive branch, though I wasn't about to shoulder all the blame. Truth be told, I don't feel like this mess is entirely my fault. The dynamics between her and our parents have always been skewed in her favor. She's used to getting whatever she wants, no questions asked. So honestly, it wouldn't have shocked me if she had known all along about the loan and just went along with it, fully expecting everyone to bend over backward to make her dream wedding happen. After all, she's never really cared about how her actions affected me. That said, I can see now that I jumped to conclusions without giving her a chance to explain her side. That's on me. Even though she hasn't exactly treated me well over the years, I felt it was only fair to apologize. I didn't want to carry any guilt about ruining her engagement. Getting married is a big deal, and I want to move forward with a clear conscience. But what's done is done. I've apologized, and now I'm focusing on moving forward with the legal case against my parents. Thankfully, the loan wasn't approved in the end, and the bank dropped their case. But I have a feeling my lawyer played a significant role in that outcome. He's a close friend and highly skilled, so I'm confident I'm in good hands. Honestly, I hope this goes to trial because I believe my parents deserve to face serious consequences for their actions. It feels like all the frustration I've bottled up over the years is finally breaking free. I've spent so long trying to keep the peace, hoping to salvage some kind of relationship with my parents, but now I realize they never deserved that effort. They've shown me time and again that my sister will always come first. A lot of people have asked me why I bothered staying in touch with my parents for so long, especially knowing that I'd never be their priority. I didn't have a clear answer for that at first, which is partly why I waited before sharing any updates. I needed to process it myself. The truth is, I've always made excuses for them. Even when I should have stood up for myself, I found ways to justify their behavior. I'm not a confrontational person by nature. I've always been the type to walk away from people or situations that I don't like. I distance myself instead of addressing issues head on. That's just how I've always been. When my family did things that hurt me, I would pull back, avoid confrontation, and hope things would somehow get better. But this time, they crossed a line I couldn't ignore. Now, there's no walking away. This time, I'm standing my ground. With my family, distancing myself has always been a challenge. I managed to create some distance with my sister, but with my parents, it felt impossible. They had this knack for emotionally manipulating me every time I attempted to pull away. It was as if they wanted to have their cake and eat it too, favoring my sister while still demanding my presence in their lives. For a long time, I convinced myself that they loved us equally, only expressing their affection more openly toward her. But I've come to realize the truth. They didn't love us equally at all. Their affection for my sister was genuine, while my relationship with them felt obligatory, more like a safety net just in case things went south with her. It took me years to grasp that their loyalty would always lie with her, and no amount of hoping would change that. I spent my early 30s waiting for things to shift, but if it hadn't happened by now, it likely never would. It's clear that I've invested enough effort into trying to win their approval. Now, it's time for me to prioritize my own needs and feelings. I'm determined to focus on my well-being and make sure I win this battle against my parent. Update 2. My sister's engagement has officially ended, and she has wasted no time in blaming me for it. After I sent those messages to her fiancé 2 weeks ago and attempted to reconcile with her a week later, I received the news 3 days ago from various family members asking about the breakup. They were curious gossipers, eager for the details, but little did they know that my sister had blocked me. So, I was completely in the dark about their split. Initially, I felt a pang of guilt, but now I'm reassured that her fiancé deserves better, regardless of his flaws, which I suspect he had if he stayed with her for so long. No one deserves the kind of drama my sister brings. This morning, as I was about to prepare breakfast, I was jolted by loud banging on my door and the incessant ringing of the doorbell. It was unusual for anyone to act like that, so I immediately suspected it was a family member. Considering the upcoming court date with my parents, it was likely my sister, driven to a frenzy and desperate to confront me. I didn't even bother opening the door. Instead, I called out from the living room that if she didn't stop bothering me, I'd call the police. I was still half asleep and irritable, and her showing up at that hour didn't help my mood at all. After I threatened to call the cops, she began yelling at me, accusing me of ruining her relationship. According to her, her fiancé and his family now thought her parents were thieves and that she must be in on the scam too. Honestly, given how close she was to our parents, it wouldn't have surprised me if she had been involved, but I kept that thought to myself and reiterated that she needed to leave. Instead of backing down, she started kicking my door and went completely off the rails. At that point, I decided to peek through the window before opening the door just as her foot was about to make contact. She lost her balance and stumbled forward, and I had to stifle a laugh. It was too perfect. When she regained her composure, it was clear she was embarrassed, which threw her off her game. In a calm tone, I expressed my sympathy for what she was going through, but I reminded her that she had never treated me well, which led me to assume she was aware of our parents' schemes. I made it clear that what was done, and now it was on her to reach out to her fiancé and try to fix things. Engaging in a fight with me wouldn't help her situation, and I hope she understood that because I really wanted to avoid calling the cops and escalating things further. I just needed a few days of peace before the legal proceedings against our parents began so I could mentally prepare, but instead of leaving, her expression darkened, and she finally admitted that she had known all along about the loan and how our parents had made me a co-signer without my consent. She claimed she wasn't bothered by it until the bank decided to verify things instead of just approving the loan automatically. That revelation turned their entire scheme upside down. The truth was, her fiancé had ended their relationship because she had finally come clean to him. He couldn't understand why she was still in contact with our parents after everything that had transpired if she didn't support their actions. Eventually, she had no choice but to reveal the truth. The so-called conflict with our parents had merely been a performance to elicit my sympathy, hoping I would go easier on them. Now that she realized there was nothing to gain from lying and having already lost her fiancé, she felt liberated to tell me everything. I genuinely believe I have no reason to regret my actions. Everyone involved got what they deserved, and I have no intention of being lenient with my parent. It's disheartening how they have failed both of their children, leaving neither my sister nor me caring for them in the least. Still, this outcome was long overdue, and I'm relieved that we are finally confronting this situation. I'm also grateful that my sister had the courage to tell me the truth, exposing just how dysfunctional our family. Update 3. It's been 3 weeks since my last update, and I'm pleased to share that my parents have opted for an out-of-court settlement. While we're still in negotiations about the exact amount they'll pay me to withdraw the lawsuit, it's clear they will be financially accountable for their act. I wish there was a way to also hold my sister accountable, but honestly, revenge no longer interests me. She has suffered enough since her fiancé left her. From what I hear, she's planning to make a clean break, literally. Just a week after the breakup, I learned from various family members and a few of her friends that she had decided to relocate to Colorado. It's a strange and sudden choice, and those few friends who knew about my involvement have placed the blame on me, warning me that I would face consequences for my action. Well, bring it on. I'm ready. The silver lining is that the situation with my parents is finally nearing resolution. I wouldn't say everything is completely sorted, but at least I'll have some closure. I've been exhausted from the constant interactions with them, and now it looks like that chapter is coming to a close. It feels surreal to realize that I likely won't see my parents for a long time, if ever. Most of the family remains in the dark about the turmoil that unfolded, and I plan to keep it that way. I'm certain that I won't be attending any family gatherings they'll be at. Only a few of my close cousins are aware of the situation, and they've assured me that if they host any events, my parents won't be invited. This gives me peace of mind, as I won't have to encounter them unless it's purely by chance. Strangely, there's a sense of emptiness in this newfound distance, but I'm determined to move forward. With the legal matters resolved, I've decided it's time to leave my job behind. Given the financial compensation I'll be receiving, I'm ready to launch